Hello and welcome to the Scottish Football Show. Here's what's coming up this week. A difficult week for Dundee. Changes off the park for Scotland. Will there be more on it? And can Hearts please stop being mince ahead of Minsk? Yes, welcome one and all to the Scottish Football Show. I'm Andrew Slaven, your beautiful, sexy host. Um, well, if you're watching on YouTube, that is. If you are listening to this, enjoy my voice. Episode 4, I think, of the new season, and I'll just get straight into. There's so much to talk about. I just want to introduce our guests straight away. It's the familiar duo of TNT Sports senior producer Laura Brannan and Melbourne City FC head creative future super duper guy, Findlay Marks. Hello, dude. Hello, hello.
Hello.
And that is exactly how I introduce myself to clients and other people that I meet, with that exact cadence that you just used as well, Andrew. Thank you for getting it right.
And in all fairness, super duper guy should be a title.
I think it should be also in the future guy. I just quite like that because everybody else is on the same time zone here, so it's nice to remind them of that fact that we're ahead of the rest of the world.
Laura, welcome back. You missed us last week. We didn't miss you, but you're back.
So lovely to be welcomed back in open arms. Yes. Sorry I missed last week. I was on holiday.
Where were you?
I was in Chicago.
Oh, good for you, mate. Well done.
Yes.
Why were you in Chicago?
It was just a random holiday. But yeah, it was fun. I got engaged.
Shut the fudge up.
Amazing.
Oh.
And this is why I didn't text you earlier. So I wanted to save it for the show.
Unbelievable. This is madness. Normally, anyone listens to this, we'll like chat about things and blah. Like I've had becoming a dad and stuff like that. We've talked about it in the podcast. I'm like, by the way, guys, I have to mention this is hot off the press. Holy sugar balls. Wow, amazing. Congratulations.
This is fantastic news, Laura. I mean, is Andy Robertson happy as well? Like, what's he got to say on it? And how did you get him to finally cave after all these years of stalking?
Thought he had a match day as well.
That's fantastic news. Congratulations, pal.
Can you
That's
explain how it was done? Was it romantic? Is it a football ring?
It's actually
Flash the ring.
It's
class.
A $5 blue ring because it was very spontaneous, and we're going to go ring shopping together next weekend. So it's a hold. It's kind of like when you've got the stabilizers on your bike. It's a training ring just now.
Get
nice.
Used to wearing it.
That's normally what guys say on a training ring. Oh, I don't know what to do now. Where do we go after this? Like, great news. Shall we talk about last week? Because, well, and if you actually listened to the show, Laura, we were talking about
being a bit busy.
The linesman, there was a linesman at Inverness. Well, he wasn't a linesman. He was a fan of Inverness. Came on to be a lino for because there was an injury to a referee. And then Callum, who we had on last week, told us a great story about his dad having to help out on the touchline as well. And his dad actually got back in touch with us on Twitter, didn't he? Finn, what would he say actually?
It was a league match between, I think it was Livy away at Dumbarton, and he made some mention of the size of boots that they gave, but his dad went into more detail. So 5th of February 2014, if anybody wants to check, it's Colin Brian Callum's dad managed to squeeze himself, he said, into the spare ref's kit. The size of the ref that he was trying to fit into, the ref was 5'8", and Colin is 6'4", so I think it was a bit of a tight squeeze. And also the Dumbarton kit man, the only spare boots he had were size 9, and Colin is a size 12. So in his own words, he spent the second half mincing along in front of the home fans. Dogs abuse. But I was reading as well, apparently in the comments underneath that as well, I think somebody else had said, because the game was at Dumbarton, and Ian Murray, I think, was the manager at Dumbarton at the time, he was shouting the whole match, like, why somebody being pulled from the away end to do this? But it's like you've got to go with the options that you've got in front of you, and it was Colin.
There was only one.
Yeah, we end at Livy and straight onto the touchline. So,
Amazing.
yeah, that was such a class story.
Always really good to hear from people who listen to this podcast, get in touch with us, especially with our kind of new segment this season where we kind of talk more about the industry, because we all work in the industry, we all work in sport television in all different areas and guises. I'm just a mercenary these days. I do everything. So I kind of get a flavour of it all. So do send us in some questions. We've had some more. And funnily enough, I will get to Rangers' result at the weekend, but there was a question about did we see Philip Clement's post-match presser on Sunday, and how do press conferences work? And really, there's only one person to go to here, which would be you, Laura, having worked in club media before at Motherwell and at Celtic. So, how do press conferences normally work in terms of managing broadcasters and reporters from, newspapers and like BBC and stuff like that as well?
I think this came off the back of Philippe Clement's rather dramatic post-match antics. He got out of his chair and was demonstrating how you fall and how you have to put your arms up to balance yourself, which absolutely fine. I think it's great to see a manager doing that, really interacting in that way. It's unusual though for press conferences. Normally it's just sit down, 10 minutes of chat, and they leave, and it's quite boring. It's actually probably the most boring part of the job. How they actually work though. So clubs will run press conferences for pre-match and post-match, and they're quite different. So pre-match is normally held on a Thursday or Friday before the game, and it will be split into the broadcast and digital will be in one room, and the newspapers will be, and all the written press will be in another room. And you'll take the manager to each, and then you'll take a player to each as well. And it kind of goes in the order of the rights holders start it off. So you'll probably find the likes of BBC or Sky, if they've got a journalist there, they'll ask the first questions, and then it works its way back to the kind of lesser important journalists that know their place. And from being that lesser journalist in my years, when I first started out at STV, what you find is that actually the others will ask the questions that you want to ask before you get in, and you start to panic because you go, I need to ask a question so my bosses know I've put in the effort, but I've ran out of questions. So you'll find that the lesser important ones start asking dafter questions just to kind of be like, hello, I'm here. And to make themselves feel like they've merited a place there. So it can be quite nerve-wracking because you're kind of all fighting with each other to get in and answer the best questions.
Just to jump in, that's really interesting because even when you even as a reporter, like if you're doing a sit-down interview with anyone and you've got maybe 10, 15 minutes just one-to-one, like it's totally fair to ask the same question, just maybe in a different way, because you'll still get another answer. And it might be a similar answer, but it might just trigger them to say something different as well.
I mean, people will try, especially if it's a touchy subject and they're really trying to get like a news line out of it. You will find that they'll go back to it. Other reporters will go back to try and get their little bite in at it, until you get to the point where the person who's speaking to them just gets a bit touchy. And you'll get, depending on who it is, like for the likes of like Gordon Strachan, for example, would shut it down immediately and not take anything from the media and call it out. Whereas others, lesser experienced managers, might actually fall at it the fourth or fifth time it's been asked in a different way. And then you get the post-match press conferences as well, which is a bit more of a kind of rabble. You'll find that, so for example, the BBC or Sky, again, or even Premier this season, they'll have the reporters pitch side. So they'll get first dibs. The manager will come out and do a pitch side interview with them. That's an exclusive. That's a one-to-one. And they are sometimes called flash interviews as well, which means that it's immediate. It's like before they've went into the dressing room as they're walking off the pitch. And then once they've been in the dressing room, had the kind of cool down, debrief with the players, they'll come back out maybe about 20 minutes after the end of the game, half an hour, and they'll do a big gathering of all the journalists, and it'll just be all in, basically. And then afterwards, what they tend to do is the reporters between themselves will decide which parts are embargoed, and it might be a case of like the last questions might be kept for the Sunday newspapers or the Monday papers or whatever, and they kind of work it out themselves.
It's interesting because I think you can definitely, I think there's a real art to doing interviews like that, and it's something that I think managers get quite long in the tooth. Weirdly, I think the managers that are best at it are the ones that keep the press conference the most boring, because it should be a chance really for you to say what you want to say as the manager and dictate the narrative. So if there are difficult questions coming in, you're like, I'm not speaking about that today, let's talk about the game or something.
Absolutely.
And some managers are really good at it, some managers not quite so good. I think in recent seasons, you know, people like Michael Beale who would change what he said answer to answer, not particularly good. But then Steven Gerrard at Rangers was a really good example, I think, of somebody who knew exactly what he wanted to say and gave nothing away. Lee Johnson was always an interesting one at Hibs as well, and we've had different characters that kind of say different things.
There's also been some absolute howlers in press conferences, or even pre-match press conferences, and also post-match, like flash interviews that you were talking about, like reporters getting players' names wrong, and like players going like what, and or for instance,
Jim
there was one
McLean
where
wanting to punch Chick Young, was it?
no, it wasn't. Jim
not
McLean
wanting to. He did.
He did.
He
Yeah,
lamped him.
God.
Yeah.
That's
It was
like
also
25 years ago.
I've witnessed reporters get you know, the result of a game wrong, like right off the
Ooh.
back of full time. I was in Gibraltar for Celtic against Lincoln Red Imps, and I was there for BT Sport, which was Brendan Rodgers' first ever competitive game in charge of Celtic. You know, it was a shock. Lincoln Red Imps beat Celtic 1-0. Massive like uproar. So we're stood by. It's just me and Emma. We don't have anyone else. We're dealing with a purely Spanish crew, and it was difficult. The language barrier wasn't hard, but we were like, the reason we're there is to get an interview with Brendan Rodgers, and post match we're stood there. It's a big shock. So we got the goal scorer interview, which went into the program, and then we're stood there waiting for Brendan Rodgers. Brendan Rodgers arrives. The cameraman's just saying we're not ready yet. Me and Emma are like, come on, like we need to do it now. Like we're literally on air. Like we need to have this interview in the bag. And Brendan Rodgers speaks Spanish, but inevitably he speaks to the camera guy and goes like, "What's the hold up?" And he explains what's happening. He's like, "Well, you've had your time," and he walks off. And I'm like, "Oh man,
it's not a great
absolute killer."
presentation.
But these are
That's
sometimes the difficulties you have if you don't spend the cash to get your own thing. You know what I mean? Like you got to spend the money and to make sure that you get what you want. And that was a local crew who totally let us down. Out of our control. We were ready, they weren't. So
Yeah,
it wasn't BT Sports' fault or anything like that.
Yeah.
That was just really, really difficult. But professionally for me, it was like we're there to do that one thing and we couldn't get it. But it wasn't us. It wasn't on us.
It doesn't
Anyway.
go down well with the bosses. I was there at the press conference when Gary Hooper made the remarks about the referees when they were cheating back in 2012, 2011, when the
that was
refs
after
ended up
Dundee United game, wasn't it?
So they ended up going on strike after that. And what was interesting is, and this happens as well, if players, for example, say something that they don't want to, like the club doesn't want to get used, the press officers will talk to the journalists about dropping that question and taking it out. It is quite normal to do that, but Celtic obviously lost the battle in that one. They tried to get it removed, and the journalist stood firm and was like, "This is far too big a line," and we've all got it, and you've said it in a live press conference. Just before we move on, I would find it really interesting to hear from the listeners, though, to find out if they actually enjoy watching press conferences, because there was a kind of spell a few years back where a lot of clubs streamed them live, back in their Facebook Lives and stuff like that. And clubs will still put out the full press conferences. Do fans actually enjoy watching that? I don't know if I'm just spoiled because I've seen so many, but is that a novelty? Is that a good insight for fans?
Well, let them get in touch with us if they actually do. Personally, I don't. But I'm also like, sometimes they're just taking up my time. Please stop talking so I can go home.
Because all a press conference really should be is just who's available. Like, are there any injury issues coming up for the game? That's really all it should be. And it's interesting as well. I've definitely heard other journalists who kind of write or work in different countries as well explain that UK football media and press conferences are entirely different to other countries. I'm sure I've heard James Horncastle and James Richardson talk about in Italy, for example, that a lot of the journalists will ask them questions about the match and tactical questions. They will be like, why did you play this player ahead of this player last week? What was the thinking behind that? So when these coaches come to the UK and they're being asked about, like, well, your play was out to 2 a.m. last night, have you got any thoughts on that? They're like, what? How? It's a completely alien concept to them, because the journalists in those countries talk about the football, whereas we tend to have a need to sensationalize it, as we do with a lot of the media in this country. Exactly. But that's kind of what it is. And it's like you alluded to the point, Laura, of if there is a strand or something that's been a non-football story during the week, that will be the thing that they tend to ask about, hoping that they can wear a manager or a player down so they can eventually do it. So it requires, like, media training is such an important thing as well, and it requires people to have that thick skin to just keep batting away these questions. And it's immensely frustrating when you want to get to the nub of an issue, but that's a good way to be with the press, is when you are able to just keep your cool and just ignore all that and say exactly what you want to say and control the narrative.
Football, bloody hell.
Well, shall we talk about the football then and stop talking about press conferences? Yes. We should start with Dundee, because there wasn't great news coming out of the club at the weekend. Wasn't great results for either team in Dundee, to be fair. But Mo Silla, the Dundee player, collapsed at half-time in the dressing room. And there's been not a lot of updates other than he's been in hospital and that he's stable, and so it seems quite positive. But we should just hope that everything keeps going in the right direction and that he gets back to football as soon as possible, and hopefully there's nothing that stops him from doing that. So good luck, Mo. All with you, mate. But elsewhere, staying with Dundee, their former player, Fabian Caballero, passed away. Sort of out of the blue. He was playing in a futsal match. I can't quite remember where. But I think he's only 46 years old. It's an absolute, it's a real shame. Ex-Arsenal player as well. But really disappointing news coming out of Dundee. I don't know if you guys remember Caballero playing for Dundee. You might remember, Finn, because it was that wonderful heyday period where all these superstars were coming, weren't they?
Yeah, it was the kind of, it was a bizarre period at Dundee. Ivana Bonetti came in as manager, and he had, like, ties to Balkan warlords and stuff like that. It was just like a crazy time. Excuse me, but there were a lot of players that came in, big names and stuff. I remember, like, Fabrizio Ravanelli coming, but there were quite a few players that came in, and it was all very exotic, because I think at the time, it was around about 2000, I think it was. We did have foreign players in Scottish football, but not, like, most squads would still be predominantly Scottish, and especially maybe if you were a more provincial club, for want of a better expression, you probably would have one, maybe two foreign players. Dundee had a whole raft of them. And, you know, when players come in like that, some of them maybe just guns for hire, wanted a good payday, didn't stay around too long. Fabian Caballero was genuinely a fan favourite. I think he was at Dundee for about 5 years, you know, over 100 appearances, 20 odd goals. Like, he was a real fan favorite. And I remember him playing. He was an exciting player to watch. He was one of those players that could do amazing with the ball at his feet, could do tricky things and turn games just when he wanted, and playing as part of that exciting Dundee front line at the time. Yeah, he was really good. It's just, it's a tragedy. Like, you just think as well, like, footballers, professional athletes, you know, to die of a cardiac arrest at 46, it just kind of puts a lot of things in perspective. And I mean, that's a tough week anyway for Dundee and their supporters, but to have a player have this kind of scare as well, and thank goodness he's responsive and hopefully he recovers well. It's just, it's a pretty dark weekend for Dundee as a club. And yeah, my thoughts go out to the families of the family and friends of Mo Silla. Like, it's such a rough time.
Yeah, not nice at all. Elsewhere in Scottish football, we've got like loads of managerial updates, but no actual managerial appointments. So, like for instance, St Johnstone, they looked like they were going to be appointing the boss from Larne, Tiernan Lynch, but that's not happening because Mr. Lynch wants lots of cash. So apparently they were going to bring like they agreed like compensation with Larn. They were going to bring like his assistant and his coaches and stuff like that. But it's just wages. But who knows? By the time this goes out, he's probably going to be announced as manager. Uh, However, the Riga manager, someone who Motherwell fans may know, Simo Valakari or Valakari, Valakari,
Valakari.
Valakari. Thank you, thank you. That's why you two are on the podcast. He's heavily tipped to be the next St Johnstone manager. And in fairness, when you look at his CV, I probably want Simo more than Tiernan Lynch, if I'm honest. He's managed the national team, the Finnish national team, I should say, and he's won like trophies at 3 of the 6 clubs that he's managed. I think he's been promoted by one. He's won like the domestic cups at the other 2, and he knows Scottish football because he's an ex-Motherwell player, Laura. Like, is he? I think he's been linked with Motherwell before as well, hasn't he?
Yeah, that's what I was going to say. He's been linked with a job before at Motherwell, so for the club to have assessed him and been quite keen on his abilities tells me that he has what it takes to manage in the Premiership. So if he was to get appointed by St Johnstone, I think that would be actually quite exciting.
Yeah, I think so too. I think that'd be quite interesting.
It's interesting just having a look at these names being linked, and Tiernan Lynch, obviously from Northern Ireland. It's a ground where St Johnstone have found a lot of luck with their managers before, Steve Lomas, and then obviously Tommy Wright as well coming in. And there's been quite a few managers from Northern Ireland that have come over to Scotland, done quite well. So it's interesting. It just, obviously couldn't agree personal terms. But then Simo Valakari is this kind of like, when you order Jimmy Taylor off Wish kind of thing. It's like people are maybe looking to like these Nordic or Scandinavian countries and just seeing, is it time? I mean, we talked about this last week. Is that now the blueprint maybe, rather than just the same names of Scottish managers getting recycled, and it's like, oh, it's going to be Neil Lennon or Malky Mackay or Mark McGee or something like that. I find it quite refreshing that people are trying to look for different talent and trying to transpose that into the Scottish Premiership. So I'd be interested if it was Simo Valakari, another player that I remember quite well from his time at Motherwell. He was quite, again, at this time where there weren't many foreigners in the squads, it was just starting to get more foreign players through. He was a really decent player because he was a bit earlier, like mid-90s, I think, to the end of the turn of the millennium. He was at Motherwell. But yeah, it'd be interesting to see what happens.
Like a lot of people have learned their lesson for just discounting anyone after what Ange Postecoglou did with Celtic. I know it was Celtic, and most managers would probably do well at Celtic, but there was a lot of people thinking it was a bizarre appointment because nobody knew who he was. So let's just wait and see what happens. Hopefully it's good news for St Johnstone and they do get someone in that can turn their fortunes around. At Hearts, rock and roll time, baby. Gareth Aisworth has definitely applied for the job because he said so. But this is peak Scottish football, folks.
This is incredible.
You take the floor, Laura, because this is right up your street. I think you're going to hire his band for your wedding, aren't you?
This is actually quite exciting. I don't think this is going to happen, okay? Probably because I want it to happen so much. But if anyone doesn't know who this guy is, he's had like a kind of journeyman football career down in England. He has since been the Wycombe manager for what, 10 years? Was it like about a decade?
Yeah, it's a decade, just about, yeah.
He's most recently been at Queen's Park Rangers for a short spell, but more importantly, he's in a band. He's a frontman of a rock band called Cold Blooded Hearts. This is proper peak Scottish football. Think of the headlines, okay? I'm thinking all about the headlines here. He's the front man. He's got the gig. Come on, it's brilliant. If he's a front man, if he's a lead singer of a band, he's going to have a personality to take on Scottish football. Oh, he'd probably be terrible, but I still want him to be. I still want him in the game.
he does have an incredible personality. Although he's had some gaffes in the past. I think when he was at Queen's Park Rangers, they lost the opening day, and he came out and said that at least he has a squad that's good enough to finish 21st at the table, which I think the joke went past the Rangers fans, Queen's Park Rangers fans. But he also did this weird PR stunt. And I think Lyndon Dykes was actually the only person who was into this. He got like a local New Zealand like tribe in or something like that, and he made his squad do the haka, and it was bizarre. Did you see this, Finn? You're nodding your head. Did you see it? But it's the weirdest thing.
Yeah, I definitely heard the story, but I mean, like, I'm all for that kind of stuff because you get like these amazing stories of yeah, was it Gary Caldwell when he was at Partick Thistle got the squad kidnapped by the SAS and then they had to do like survival training and stuff. But it's, you know, managers will try anything to try and get maybe a faltering or failing squad when they come in to try and turn it around and get them thinking in a different way. Yeah, he's a real character. I think it weirdly reminded me, this isn't football related, but I'll bring it back around. When people that you just wouldn't think of being musicians or leading a rock band are, and you're like, oh, that's a bit left field. I don't know if you guys remember the TV show on CITV, Art Attack.
Oh yeah.
And the guy, the main guy in that, Neil Buchanan, was on like kids TV for like 20 odd years. He's also the front man in a rock band. But the reason I say this is because it not only is that a great fact, the name of the band that he's in is Marseille, of course, a very famous French football team. So there we go, bringing it full circle back to the football thing.
Love it.
Cool.
Absolutely love it.
Weird. So weird. Yeah, so who knows? I can't see Hearts going for Gareth Aisworth. He should have stayed at Wycombe Wanderers. That was his club. He got them from League Two into the Championship. Which is, you know, impressive, but it took him 10 years. Yeah, interesting. Elsewhere, though, there's all change in the Scotland setup, Laura. You can take that away with us.
Yes, Austin McPhee has stepped down from his role as coach and set piece.
Austin
master,
McPhee!
You know.
Very good.
That was actually quite
I'm a
good.
dad. I can do it. I can do it.
I enjoyed
I'm a
that
dad.
one.
I'm allowed.
Quite sad his circumstances. I think it's his dad's not well, so he's taking the time off from because he's at club. He's at Aston Villa, so obviously the time off is quite precious to him.
I feel like you've just done me there, like that. Have you seen that Irish TV like chat show thing where there's the woman who goes like, "This family have 6 children," and the presenter goes, "6 children," and then goes like, "All sadly perished at the weekend." And now I feel like you've just done that to me. I'm like, oh.
I don't know if this is, I mean, some of this is circumstantial, as you're just explaining there about Austin McPhee's dad, but it's, I don't know if it's necessarily a bad thing, just have a bit of a freshen up, because this is something that we were talking about, you know, at the start of the season and kind of reviewing a little bit of what happened during the Euros. And it was, I mentioned that I don't know if Steve Clarke is the kind of person that will change his approach much. But if you're not changing the manager, and that's a fairly drastic thing to do, I think one of the things you can do is freshen up your coaching staff. So actually having 2 or 3 new coaches come in just to freshen things up a little bit, different ideas and everything, I don't think is necessarily a bad thing. And because things maybe have gotten a little bit stale with the way that we play and approach games at a national team level. And I just think maybe a few new voices and Steve Clarke's here could give him a few different ideas and ways to approach things, and it just freshens things up in the squad. I think we've talked about so many times that football is so cyclical, and you do need to just recycle things every now and again, freshen things up. So I didn't think it was the worst news, and it'll be interesting to see the staff that come in to be the coaches of the national team setup.
Yeah, well, we'll see what squad Steve Clarke puts out, which will be this week, I believe. He announces the squad, but quite fun this, Laura. The games are going to be on STV, I think, aren't they?
That is the chat anyway. Apparently, if I've listed it on their website, it's been on STV. Obviously, there was a bit of back and forth in the last round of Nations League games in September because Channel 4 didn't get the rights until pretty much the day before it, and it seemed like no one really wanted it. It was a bit back and forth there. So if STV have taken it, that's great news. It's on free to air again, because I think Channel 4 pulled in brilliant numbers for the last 2 games.
Yeah, they would have done.
Let's hope it's true.
Yeah, fingers crossed. Croatia away, then Portugal at home. 2 easy games. God.
We've actually got a brilliant record against Croatia competitively. Maybe not in more recent seasons, but even, this is the team that were finishing 3rd or 4th or whatever at World Cups as far back as 1998. I think we were unbeaten against them in up until very recently. I remember Snodgrass scoring over there, and nobody fancied us, and we beat them over there. Yeah, wow. So we've actually got quite a good record, and famously, I said Portugal weren't all that heading into the Euros and other matches. So fine, it should be all right. The good thing is that, with the squad being announced, a lot of our players, I think, and key players or potentially key players, are finding form. So McTominay scored his first goal for Napoli this week. I think Shea Adams is 3-3 for Torino. Thankfully, Lawrence Shankland's finding the back of the net again. We'll get into that more in a minute. But I think there are some interesting questions as well. Ben Doak scored for Middlesbrough, first start and first senior career goal, which is really exciting. It's just such a talent. It wasn't just that, he was causing havoc and creating chances and everything in that match. Lennon Miller, I think, is 3 and 4. I mean, he's still in the doldrums of the under-21s, on the bench in the under-21s. I just don't get that. These are the kind of players that I think we should be filtering into the full team setup once you know that you've got this potential, and just getting them involved in that. It's Kevin Nisbet looks like he's been reignited again, playing for Aberdeen. He's got 3 and 4. And I mean, Dave Watson's goal at the weekend, that guy should be knocking on the door of the national team as well. So there's a lot of positive stuff, I think, in terms of the squad announcement. I'm sure Steve Clark will just pick the same boys that he's done every single time. But there's definitely a lot of players that are, I think, ready to step in and give us something different in the national team.
Quickly, guys, there was a little mention from Barry Anderson, friend of the podcast, saying that a member of the SNP were saying they'd consider a proposal about changing the rules on alcohol inside football grounds in Scotland. Do we really believe that this is on the table, or do we feel like this is the same old thing we hear every single year?
I think this is quite a speculative question, maybe in politics question time or whatever. But I think what's interesting is that the member of SNP who was involved didn't just shut it down. He said it was open to, we will discuss it, which seems quite encouraging. But what needs to happen first is the SFA need to actually put forward a motive for it and actually ask for it to be discussed. So the ball is in our court, so to speak. It is in football's court to really push this on, because if the government are happy to discuss it, let's get that ball rolling. Let's actually be adults about it and discuss it, because we are the only country in the world, it feels like, where this isn't possible. And we really need to get the Times to stop punishing fans for something that happened 50 odd years ago.
Yeah. Right. Shall we talk about what happened at the weekend? I think we should.
The dogs bark and the caravan passes. The caravan keeps moving. The caravan keeps going.
I'm going to start with what I think was the best game of the weekend. That was Kilmarnock 3, Dundee United 3. Pretty mad, this game, to be fair. Dundee United took the lead, then Kilmarnock got it to 3-1, and then just madness near the end. When Dundee clawed it back with, what was it, like a 9th minute injury time penalty or whatever. But it's got one of the best goals of the season so far in this match. David Watson coming on at half time, making it 1-1 with a kind of scissor kick, overhead kick, hybrid type acrobatics. It was amazing, this. And I actually kudos to BBC's Sports Scene for giving a little graphic tagline, the Presswick Pirlo. David Watson. Bearing in mind, he won the Writers' Young Player of the Year last season. So this is a lad that, like you say, Finn, would really like to see him be more in the Scotland setup.
100%. And I think there are a couple of these players. I do think, I mean, fans outside of the old firm constantly moan about this of like a player can be absolutely sensational, and then as soon as they move to maybe warm the bench at Ibrox or Celtic Park, they're like, oh, this player might be actually quite good for the national team. But Dave Watson's definitely a player that should be knocking on the door of the Scotland national team. I mean, midfield isn't an area that we're necessarily struggling with, but I do think these young talented players deserve a chance. Even
Just expose them to the best. Expose them to
exactly.
the elite level setups and elite players, and they'll learn where to be and the level that is expected of them. That's just the fact of it.
Being around the squad as well, you learn so much about how to carry yourself as a professional, watching what they do, the way that they prepare for games and all of that kind of stuff. Ask them questions as well. Like it's just, yeah, it's really important, I think, and it's something I think we're absolutely dreadful at as a nation is involving younger players in the national team setup before it's too late. But yeah, I mean, it shows a lot as well about Dundee United as well, I think, to stick with it and keep coming back, because we've seen, especially, I mean, there have been periods in recent seasons where Kilmarnock's home form has been imperious at times and it's elevated them to European positions and everything. But under McInnes, he really has made Rugby Park a fortress again, and it's a really difficult place to go. They've got a great record. So to be 3-1 down, and as you say, going into like the 10th minute of injury time and still being able to take a point is really good. Yeah.
Yeah, very, very, very good. In fact, Kilmarnock, interestingly, go to Dundee next Saturday, so play the other team, which is managed by his former number 2, Tony Docherty. So always an interesting one, that one. For Dundee United, I think it's only another draw for them. I think that they've only got one defeat this season, so they're still doing really well in their first season back. Over to Aberdeen, 2-1 winners against Dundee, and a record-breaking season, a perfect season so far under Jimmy Tilleen. He even admitted, though, that Dundee were probably the better side. I do wonder, though, Laura, do you think, like, I don't feel like we've seen this sort of consistency from a club outside of Celtic and Rangers since, like, Hearts, like when they challenged for the title. Like, how far do we just enjoy this ride right now in Scottish football to see another team doing so well? When do we start believing that this momentum can go throughout the whole campaign?
Yeah, like I remember there was a year when Dundee United were sitting top of the table come Christmas time or kind of around that period, and they were challenging as well. So that it has, the last kind of 10, 15 years, it has happened. But yeah, you kind of get that turning point, be it around the cold winter hits in like late January, early February, and the thing is, their fitness does take its toll. They don't have the players. It all comes down to the money argument as well. They don't have the players to be able to last the length of a season. If they go out the cups, does it make it better for them? Does it make it more realistic to then go on a league run? But then we saw Aberdeen, the year that they really pushed like Celtic all the way. They caved in, what was it, March time? It really kind of crumbled. It was like single figure games left the season. And even at that point, no one was really talking about them like actually realistically going for the title. So I don't think anyone will take it serious as a title challenge until you're talking about the last until you get to the split. Let's say that.
Yeah.
So right now, it's just let's enjoy it. Even the Aberdeen fans are joking that they're getting carried away. So if we start talking title challenges, they're going to laugh at us as well. But I think let's just enjoy it. It's great. It's great for Scottish football in general. So I don't think anyone's knocking it right now.
It is really good. It is really good, and it's a great introduction to Tulane as well. They did miss the star striker at the moment, which is Papagay. He got injured, and I haven't read anywhere what the detail is and when he might be back, but they would definitely want him back soon. I think Aberdeen face Hearts next Sunday. We'll get on to Hearts in a second. But Motherwell, Laura, 2-1 winners against St Mirren. Split loyalties will it be for you, actually? Enjoying this win probably as an ex-Motherwell staff member, but then your former boss, Stephen Robinson, also losing. We're good mates with Stephen, aren't we?
I know, it's a shame for him. And Marco Hara missing a penalty. It was all like, it was a strange
Motherwell
emotional
madness.
watch. Kevin Van Veen coming on as well as a sub, James Scott coming on as a sub and almost scoring an equaliser. It was all very strange. It was like 2019 all over again. But yeah, no, this was actually a really good game. It was full of drama, and then Dan Casey decided to take the goalie's position and
Great
save the
save.
ball on the line. Moment
Get
of
sent off.
madness. Yeah. So it was nothing short of drama. It was a good match.
But a big day for Lennon Miller, who bagged the brace. Probably should have had a hat trick. It would have been hard, but a big up and coming player.
He's coming on leaps and bounds. He is doing so well to be playing regularly and now getting goals as well. He's learning so much at such a rapid pace. And that's what I like to see. Rather than going out to like a bigger club and sitting on the bench for half the season just because he's training with good players, he's actually playing week in, week out, and he's going to be getting an education that he wouldn't get elsewhere.
So Motherwell are going to take on Hibs next Saturday. St Mirren, though, they meet their former boss, Jim Goodwin, who's obviously in charge of Dundee United. Connections everywhere in Scottish football. Rangers, Finn, were 1-0 winners against Hibs. We've already spoken about Clement being animated in his post-match. That was funny. Rangers go to St Johnstone next Sunday, maybe with a new manager. But it was a great result in Malmo, mate. Absolutely superb. I think it caught a lot of people by surprise.
Yeah, including the Rangers fans, to be honest, I think. I mean, it was incredible. It's got, I mean, it's just so Rangers at the moment, isn't it? Absolutely stinking the place out in the league, because the Hibs match was dire. Oh, what a sludge to watch that. Just rubbish. Honestly, the most fun thing of the whole game was, apart from Tom Lawrence's goal was lovely, but Clint's post-match was the best thing. But it's just when you contrast that to the way that they play in Europe, and not just in this match, but in, for a number of seasons and on a European stage, it's just like, how can you not replicate this in the league? Although I would still say the same issues are there, which is they can't finish teams off. I don't think it's doing Rangers a disservice to say they should have scored 4 or 5 goals in that game, like with the quality of the chances they had. Cheney threw 1-on-1 with the goalkeeper, and there were a couple of chances late on that they should have put them away. But it's a brilliant result. It's the first time a Scottish team has ever beaten Malmo. I think at the 4th or 5th time of asking in a European tie.
Celtic playing them too, yeah.
And I think Aberdeen might have lost them as well historically. So it's good. It was nice as well because they were giving it all that in the pre-match. Malmo, I think they put out a video saying, "Oh, the first time we played you, you ended up in the 4th division, and the second time you made it to European final." And they were just like, "Oh, can I do?" So it was nice. The Rangers admin kind of got their own back at the end of that game. That was quite nice to see. But we were talking about it in the podcast last week, I think these games, the away matches against Union Saint-Gilloise and Malmo are really the two. If Rangers can pick up points, and they've already got 3, if they could get 6 points from those 2 away games, that's incredible. And the way that the leagues are in the Champions League, Europa League, and the conference, the higher up you finish in the league, if you get through, the better your draw will be or should be for the next round. Or if you finish high up at all, you skip the next round and you go straight into the round after that. So it's a terrific start, as it was for Celtic, and we're obviously hoping that Hearts will do something similar this week coming.
For sure. Well, that's the thing. Hearts stopping the rock finally for the Jambos. A 1-1 draw, but it's a draw nonetheless. It just stops the racking up of losing matches all the time. But I think it also was like a 96th minute equaliser. Lauren Shankland, bit of a tap in as well. So they are going into this game against Dynamo Minsk, who are like I think they're currently second of the Belarus Premier League. Although they're pretty much top. They've got an unbelievable record at home this season. I think they've only failed to score once in 11 home matches. They've won their last 7 home games. They've only conceded 9 goals. They're a proper outfit. But so were Malmo, right? So maybe Hearts can take this little bit of positivity from the weekend and just churn something out, just churn a result out. I don't know what you guys think, but Lauren Shankland scoring, Laura, is definitely a good thing.
Oh, absolutely, for Hearts in Scotland, absolutely. But I think
I knew
the
you'd say
timing,
that.
you teed me up there. The timing of it, though, I think was so important the weekend. It'd been, this down and out. It's been miserable. They've lost their coaches, their management. It's been a really negative place right now. But to claw it out and in front of your own support, pull that equaliser out the bag. And I know they didn't really celebrate it because it was more relief than anything else, than sheer celebration. But it's also a message as well. It's a message from the players to the fans, and also to each other as well. I'm hoping that it helps the team spirit there going into this European game midweek, that it'll boost their confidence quite a bit, because whatever they've been trying on the training pitch hasn't been working. Now something clicked, albeit in the last minute, and it's now about taking it into Thursday night and really pushing on a bigger stage. So brilliant timing.
Fingers crossed for Scottish football. Ross County doing really well this season. Only 2 defeats in 7 league matches. Ronan Hale seems like a really good buy. Came in from Clifton Vale in the summer. 6 goal in 10 games, and it was an absolute beezer. But speaking about Celtic, 6-0 winners against St Johnstone. Oh my God, do they look good right now? It's ridiculous. But it's good to see, because they're going to play Dortmund on Tuesday night. I think it's Tuesday night in Dortmund.
They've been conceding a lot of goals recently as well. They conceded 2 at the weekend, 5 last weekend. 5-1 defeat to Stuttgart's not great. They are being leaky, and it's something that Celtic should be looking to exploit. I can't see Celtic getting a result over there, but at least if they keep the scoreline down and maybe even sneak a draw, it could be massive.
I think a draw would be a huge point for Celtic. That would be massive. Just because if you can really be confident about getting all points at home, you're at a point,
which they should be.
You're kind of through. Yeah, they should be all right. So really interesting to hear Brendan Rodgers say that his Celtic team are kind of on the same page now. Because they were just electric against St Johnstone. I hope St Johnstone get a new manager and turn their fortunes around, because they looked pretty hopeless, sorry to say. Right, can I just rattle through the lower leagues? Give me a nod. Yes, because people have things to do. And if you're listening, you probably have things to do too. So Championship quickly. Falkirk couldn't get back top of the table because they lost to Raith Rovers. Raith Rovers, it was a first home game for Neil Collins, I believe. So they're winning again. Falkirk aren't winning anymore. Hopefully that Celtic defeat in the League Cup didn't dent them too much.
It's also just worth pointing out that this brings to an end, I think it's 42 or 43 consecutive, an unbeaten run of 43 matches, I think it was, for Falkirk, which was by far, in a way, the best record in Scotland. So now that that's over, it's weird. Sometimes when you've got those things that run and run and run, weirdly, to have a defeat and just kind of wipe the slate clean gets a bit of that pressure away. So maybe we'll see. It'll be interesting to see what happens next weekend with Falkirk, if they can bounce back and just get back to winning ways again, because they've started this season the way that they've left off last season.
Well, I just hope for a very, very competitive championship, which it tends to almost be, always, every year. Ayr are still top of the table. I know Scott Brown was linked to the St Johnstone job, but he's not going there. He wants to stay at Somerset Park. That is good news for Ayr, because they're doing very well. League One, this is what I wanted to get to. Queen of the South are top of the league, baby. 2-0 winners against rock bottom Dumbarton. Glad we played them, because they're rubbish. 4 wins out of 4 home league games, though, at Palmerston. 100% record. Get in there. It's not all plain sailing, because Alloa, they are level on points with us. They drew 2-2 with third place Montrose, so it's competitive in League One this year. League Two, Elgin City remain unbeaten in League Two. They had a 3-3 thriller against second bottom Edinburgh City, but weirdly they're unbeaten, but they're still only third in the table. They just don't have enough wins. East Fife, they have many wins because they are top of the table, thanks to Nathan Watson. He scored against Spartans in a 1-0 win. And it's good to see Dick Campbell, Finn, working his magic yet again. He loves it. Can't get away from it. And it was a good fortnight for Forfar as well, because the Loons earned back-to-back victories, taking them out of the bottom horrible part of the table into lovely, comfortable, couchy mid-table. So that is it. Did you enjoy that? Finn, did you enjoy it?
Very much so. Thank you very much. I might come again next week.
Laura, are you up to speed? You know what's happening in Scottish football?
Absolutely. I'm always on the ball, even when I'm in America.
Always on the ball. Well, congratulations to you getting engaged. Can't wait for the stag do or the hag do. I'll come.
Us three.
Just us three. Why not? Better laugh.
Come to the future. You love Back to the Future, Laura.
Yeah, exactly. Big trip
Come
to
to Melbourne.
Australia.
I'd love to go to Melbourne. That would be a very good hag do. Excellent. Right. Let's go home, everyone. Or do what you're doing. Get to what you were about to do and stop listening to us. So go and listen to something else. Or do something else. This is over. Goodbye.